We're going to start moving towards our first co-design session, but first a presentation by Robert and Gino on how mixed reality may play a part in addressing issues that you've focused on during the last activity, and some demonstrations of tools that could address them. Go ahead, Robert.
Thank you. I'm actually going to be using a website, so just before I start, actually, we can probably postpone that to a later time. Inside my presentation, we're going to be doing two different pieces. So we're going to showcase some technology that could pretty much do some of the stuff that we were talking about before, like how it can afford some of the experiences that might be missing. But in a later part of today, we're actually going to be doing a demo where we will be going into some virtual environments, which kind of employs some of these techniques inside of it, and I prepped quite a few demos for that. So without further ado, we'll share that website link later time, but without further ado, I'm going to walk through the website with you on some pieces, and this is available to you afterwards or anytime. And that's it. So the main sections I'm going to be covering today are the affordances of extended reality platforms. And then I'm going to be going and exploring digital haptic displays. And finally, looking at some tools that we made in the last couple of years during COVID that kind of make some of these digital platforms possible and allow you to be the author inside that place. So the first one I'm going to go to is the affordances of extended reality platforms. And the goal of this is to actually recreate the senses of sight, hearing, and touch within the virtual environment and trying to eliminate some of those barriers that are felt when inside different ICTs. And so the way this can be done is through some mediums such as a head-mount display, projective virtual reality, and smartphones. And the affordance of this technology allow for the creation of immersive and accessible multi-sensory environments. And these technologies can be used in your day-to-day. And so just to show some of the technology I have in front of you is an Oculus Rift headset or Oculus Quest headset, and it provides the visual and sound cues to the user. And it allows you to track their hand and head orientation inside that virtual space. So with this headset, you have the 3D visuals in front of you, but also the 360 sound around your headband, and two controllers that allow you to track your hand position within that virtual space, giving you not only the spatial understanding of that space, but also the auditorial piece as well. And so this technology can actually be paired with a little bit of a fancier technology that's called a force feedback haptic glove, which adds an air sense to the display, which is haptics. So this provides force feedback, which restricts the fingers when interacting with virtual objects, and also provides haptic or vibration feedback that can be felt on each individual piece. And if we have time today, I do have a demo set up in the room, which I can show it. But I'm going to actually show this video, which shows these two technologies in action. And it's in a kitchen scenario. So this is taking a fully virtual environment and then representing in visual, in sound, and also in a haptic display. So as I'm going through this piece, you can notice on the top left side is as you grab each object, it conforms around the virtual reality hand, and it kind of mimics those different pieces that were explained. I'm gonna stop that. So some advantages of head-mount display, or HMD, in virtual reality is that for persons with sight loss, they actually have a better time inside an HMD versus other digital 2D mediums, like when you share a screen, say, inside Zoom. And the reason is because they're able to go closer to these 3D objects and evaluate it from different angles. If they have partial sight, as said, they could see it from different perceptions and then kind of gauge like what that object is and turn it and mimic it around in front of them. Another good thing about it is it includes some of the best 3D sound, so you can, as you go closer to these objects or environment pieces inside that room, they're able to go closer and further away from it, turning their head to kind of gauge what that sound is. And then finally, it can be paired with a lot of different high-end devices, such as a haptic glove, but there's also haptic suits, there's body tracking, which I'll be showing in a little bit. Our next piece is actually Affordances of Projective Virtual Reality, and this is a hardware setup consisting of 3 to 4 projector screens and a 5 to 1 surround sound system. So what I have here is a picture from the CNIB, or the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, where they're exploring this technology and helping people train to go across streets and to learn about different sound cues inside this experience. Users are able to go inside this room and have a really shared experience with their instructor. And this might be good for people who are, like, say, new to sight loss or in old age, where they need a participant in there to kind of overcome that fear of, say, going on the street or doing an experience their first time. And so they can have it so inside this shared space, and with that user, they can gauge on how well they did and how well they're learning to overcome this fear inside the space. So the big advantages here is that inside these types of experiences, that you can equip it with different technologies for such as body tracking, and you can have that shared space as well. So down here is actually a body tracking component where I show myself being tracked inside this 3D space. And what this allows is to add more intense information inside these things. So you can, except for just having a flat display gauging the sensory skills, you also have a way to gain feedback and have it so that it can have a computerized feedback or have gestures within that experience, making it a more rich experience in general. So this is taken further inside a piece that was made for the CNAB, again, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, where we actually help them gauge their interview skills for their clients. So these people are trying to gauge and create a more confidence inside their interview piece. So before they get the job or when they're training to go for these interviews. And so what this tool allows you to do is gauge, for example, body posture and different features that are not just, the visual and auditory experience, but also get that feedback at the end and be given that feedback to them at the end of their piece. And then furthermore, you can also apply the affordances of mobile or AR technologies as well. And so mobile AR technologies are technologies that you have on your phones. It's in your pocket already. It's definitely one of the most ergonomic solutions out there. And what happens is that these technologies they overlay objects or 3D objects onto spaces that are real. It can be the table in front of you. It can be any space at all. And what happens is that since this technology is utilizing stuff that they already have or technology they have in their pocket, that this actually becomes one of the most accessible mediums for, say, a person with sight loss, especially in the ICT world, because they're not having to learn a whole new technology to utilize this piece. And so with current technologies such as LiDAR and TrueDepth sensors being readily available on the immersive experience, you can actually create quite a few immersive experiences, even for people who need sensory needs. So I'm going to actually showcase just an example here of an AR view demo. And this pretty much showcases one of the pieces that we're talking about. Let me just get the sound.
Direct touch area. Standard AR. Button. Place object button. Point to your button. Double tap.
So I'm going to play without the audio just for a few seconds, and then I'm going to turn it on. So this is actually done with screen readers. So this technology was made to have it so that you could have an object inside a 3D space. You bring it into this space. You can place it on your desk, for example, but then have overlaid embedded information inside that object, so that it's not just a textbook or a shared object in one dimension. It has the embedded object, it has the spatial representations, and there's also audio embedded within that object. So I'm just going to let it play for a bit. So within this piece, you have the label that can be read out when you click each section. But then we have this one piece that's really important for the person with sight loss, which we've been testing, which is once they find these objects, which are available to them as if they're in a textbook, it's layered out inside a screen reader technology, they're able to find those objects as well. So I'm going to show that demo.
Focus button. Frontal phone is located at 9 o'clock to the left, about 1.0 meters away.
Oops. Did I do something?
Exit button. 2. Focus button.
Supposed to have audio.
There's audio on our end.
Frontal bone is located at 9 o'clock to the...
You want to try? Kind of an important part for this one.
When we share screen with audio.
We just had it though.
At about 1.0 meters away.
Just there. Let me double check how it's routed. Yeah, it should be going through. I don't know. It's possible that. Let's see. Ah, nice. Okay, I'll just reduce it a little bit. So what happens inside this section is that once the person finds that object inside this virtual space, they can actually navigate to it.
You have found the object. Returning the component menu.
So that was done with the screen reader. But this allows them to not just have the textbook experience and just have the info, but also have it so at the end of this, they place the object inside their room, they find each component inside that space, and then they have a spatial understanding of where information is displayed inside a spatial piece by being fully virtual still. Of course, you know, having a 3D object of everything would be the next step off of this, but this is a way to have it so you can insert that content without, oh. Okay, I think we're okay. I'm just going to move to my next section, which is exploring digital haptic displays. And so this is 2D media presented in ICT. So what happens is I want to kind of explore some things that I've been part of the Perceptual Design Lab for the last 3 years now. And we've been exploring, like, why do you need enhanced haptic displays inside learning environments or in ICTs? And so
Robert, can you hear us?
one of the key features that we actually went through is, one of the key discoveries was actually going through these raised line graphics. This is one of the common ways of actually making a haptic display out of a 2D graphic. And what this is it's usually a visual perspective of a 2D object, well, of a 3D object presented in 2D. And on the screen here is a picture of an umbrella that has almost the wireframe on it with these little bumps on the top that when actually touched by somebody with sight loss or who relies completely on the haptic component actually has a really hard time determining these features and such.
The screen online is frozen.
Oh,
Can you just try resharing?
okay, well, having technical difficulties again.
Sorry, for the folks in person, those online are not able to see the screen progress.
Are the folks, I hope.
Yes, now it's working.
Okay. And so what happens is, what happens with this raised line graph, the umbrella, when actually drawn, this is actually what it's drawn when somebody with sight loss draws it. And they have very key features, like just the cane part and just the top, over top piece. And so going further with this and just touching on what Peter shown before is that when asked the same thing, like a 2D graphic, say of a textbook of the visual cortex, they were actually, the participants in this case also made 2.5D or 3D models. And then even when I had my chance, so this was actually an experiment done that would pretty much take away, pretty much will be given a 3D object that I'd never seen before. And I was asked to touch it and pretty much label, like, what am I touching? What objects, like, what am I actually feeling? I actually had a very hard time with this as well, which kind of led to, like, hey, we need a better way to share 3D information and kind of overlay this embedded information with the use of haptics and virtual reality. And so what I have here is a example of some of the first prototypes that we do, and I'm going to run through these. So the first one is actually a graph that's displayed, and hopefully the audio
February
comes out.
40. March 10.
It didn't come in.
April 20.
Anyway, I'll describe what it's supposed to say. So once you're touching these pieces, you get a haptic experience of each of the key points. As you touch along the graph, you have the visual piece, but you also have the embedded audio inside of it. So when you hit a max or a min or a key component of that graph, it will speak out those key components. And this is all automatically generated from script, from code. And furthermore, I'm going to go to the second example actually. Furthermore, it's like, can we just recreate 3D objects? So like that same brain model given to me on the other one, if that can be done and have a haptic visual and auditory display, could that also be a way to share the 3D information inside this space? And again, I'm going to try the audio again. But the audio in this one is supposed to say off each of the components as you tap it. And you can even grab this model and kind of gain a different spatial piece. So let me just go along. You can grab this model and have a different piece on each one. And then finally, well, and another example is actually an experiment we've done with a participant in the lab who came to the lab and said, hey, he was a blind musician. He needed a better way to have it so that his experiment or the way he does his music can be done inside a haptic way. So we actually prototyped first a wooden cutout of it, but then after that for the general pieces. But then we also had this display where the person could feel the tempo of the music really quickly and kind of gauge it. And we actually had the musician have great results with both of these haptic displays. But then we took it a fully digital and had it so that the piano was written to digital components, and had it so that, again, the audio here would be Ode to Joy, a beautiful a remedy of Ode to Joy, and you'd be able to touch this with the haptic embedded audio, the notes on each one, and also the score, and this could be done for most basic music. We're not saying like the other pieces. And finally, I have the globe that's reenacted as well. And when we get to the Mozilla hubs or the hubs example, this will actually be inside the hubs itself, where we'll have it has a tactile experience of that as well. So inside this diagram, this is the actual globe that was inside the piece. And then we have the Earth model here with different components on it. So in this point, there's a component of Canada, and when you click or pinch on that object, you can interact with that piece and interact with that embedded diagram. So just to close the point, there is a need for different ways to share 3D objects to fit inside a virtual space, and it could be done with a tool that makes it easy to bring in these digital models and makes it accessible to everybody. And so like the last year, and this is the final thing I'm going to show, in the last year during the pandemic, we actually made a tool that allows it to make it quite easy to bring in 3D objects. And this was done
to
in
create 3D objects,
with
annotate
eCampus
them,
Ontario.
and then share the 3D content to mobile
So what's happening here is that I have a 3D model of a skull, and this was an actual model of a skull, an MRI scan. And we brought this model in, and you can label it with different types of annotations as shown inside the piece before. And I just want to scroll back a second to the types of annotations.
I am able to
the types of annotations that you could have. And so you can have voice annotations, so your own voice, a picture annotation, a web link, or an audio annotation embedded within this piece. And so once you place your annotations on, or these labels, you have it so that you can take this audio out and export it with the export button to a person's phone. Once they scan that QR code, they have that 3D model available to them in either a viewer, a simple viewer where they have the model with all the information embedded, or this in other ways. You can also bring in an AR and place it inside your space, showing that example I showed before with the accessible AR, making it so that 3D content can be achievable with people with their phones inside their pocket, but also accessible for people who need extra sensory capabilities inside this. Also, you can scan in any object within this app using LiDAR technology, as talked about before, and that can be imported within the app itself
and imported into our desktop program.
the last piece I want to show is that we also made it so
developed
it's
our own
accessible
3D
for
scanning
people
application that we
with
call
disabilities as well, with this scanner tool, which allows you to pretty much scan something into the app itself with the use, without having to need to use the visual cues from the other app that I showed for scanning. With that said, I do not feel like I have more time to go, but this website is available, and we're going to share it in the next, well, not the next, but the last co-design. And these examples are all available on the home page, where pretty much I've taken a collection of the lab's work and work that's been in collaboration and posted all these examples that you can apply to your ICTs and today. And if you ever wanted to try out the authoring tool itself, it's also there in the installation instructions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay, thanks everyone. Now we're going to start our co-design session. It'll be a little bit different online, but in person we'll be forming the same groups as before. So we've brought a variety of household materials here that we have in the room. Let's see, well, so we're going to be looking at taking some of the ideas and insights that were generated in that last group activity, and we're going to have groups using these materials or drawing and sketching to explore materializing these ideas in some regard. So with the facilitator's help, we'll be doing that in groups. We've got 30 minutes for this activity, so we'll be doing this until around 3:30, and you'll be notified when we have 5 minutes left and once time's up.
Okay, so for virtual participants, I'm just gonna initiate the breakout rooms. We had pretty small groups, so I'm gonna combine a couple of groups. So I think it might be
Erin, are
good once
talking? Because
you,
we can't hear your audio.
yeah, virtual, someone virtual, could you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
I can hear you.
Okay. In person, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So I was just saying, I'm going to start the breakout rooms. Since we had smaller groups, I'm going to combine some of the groups. I would say if you haven't, we didn't have that much time for the report back from the first activity, which really links with this one. So maybe take a little time to recap and then get into the prototyping. So I'm going to start the breakout rooms. And if you aren't assigned one, just give me a sec. I'm going to assign you one.